Why don't we talk about the BBL privatisation news? It's probably not big news here in the UK because, the Big Bash, the 100 takes over our sort of franchise thought process, and the Big Bash isn't, I don't know how popular it is, but it's obviously on at odd times in the morning, so probably doesn't get watched that much. But if you saw it, that the Cricket Australia had put forward a prognosis or a proposal that they were going to privatise the BBL, pretty much like the 100 did, and all 6 states, is it? 6 states, they sort of said, yes, let's do it. Paul Marsh and the ACA said, no, we don't want to do it. A, have you seen any of that news? And B, what do you think of it?
Hi Sanjay, how are you, mate? Good to see you. It's nice to be along again. You didn't give me an intro, just wallop straight in.
It shows how little you've listened to previous shows, because since I started reading about the YouTube algorithm, if you preamble and waffle and stuff at the very beginning, people switch off, like they just have done now.
That's what you've just done, haven't you?
Well, yeah, exactly.
No, I've livened it up.
You got to tell them, this is what we're going to do. You got to set the scene up. All that sort of type of thing, So that's what I did, and you've cocked it up.
Yeah.
Anyway, do you remember the question?
Once again, all about the BBL. Yeah, I saw bits of it. I saw that the big news was that that they're canning the 2 Melbourne sides, aren't they? And they're looking to do something like that. And then the other states weren't particularly happy with it. So, but it comes around to, it's been around a while, the BBL now, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And so, so the background information, there could be stuff like, the attendances, have they plateaued? That sort of stuff, as TV ratings. Because I've been out in Australia over Christmas time, and it is great to have the BBL, the Big Bash on at it's on at prime time. But then are people a bit bored with it? And much like we did with the 100, does it need freshening up? Have their have teams dominated? So competitive relevance, all that sort of stuff. And so I can see why it's sort of been proposed. So and as well, so the ACA that's the players bit, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not the PCA.
Like we have the PCA. Yeah. So, but ultimately, Cricket Australia are in charge of it. So, what are Cricket Australia like with their finances? Because do they need cash injection? And so they're the sort of stuff that I haven't seen enough of, but has that come out? And by bringing in that private equity and modernising and all that sort of stuff. Is that what they're looking to do to try and, in a way, secure the future? But it's been has it been a bit clunky in the way that they've gone about it?
I think the if you were being, let's say, a bit down in the mouth about it, or a bit, sour faced or whatever, you would say that they need to do it to keep the Indian audiences engaged, because without the Indian audiences, there's not much of a product, or they certainly don't have the viewing figures to keep the broadcasters happy. I think they're playing a match, aren't they? And they're always mooted, isn't it? Like the opening match, the BBLs in India or something. I think I read the other day. Not entirely sure, but they were talking about it. But look, it's definitely a change in the game, isn't it? Where you've got Indian IPL owners buying parts of other clubs.
Yeah, well, we've seen it here, haven't we? We've seen it here in England with the 100 franchise. And several years ago, someone said to me that players will become sort of franchise contracted, and they will travel around the world playing for their franchise. And this potentially is another step towards it. What's an IPL franchise valuation at? It's got to be close to probably $1 billion, something like that. It's got to be crazy money.
Wasn't there one that got sold the other day, like Rajasthan Royals or something? It was like $5 billion or something. Not sure, but
was it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, good to see we're current with the news, mate. Just guessing and
stuff. We don't really do the business of sport, do we? We leave that to people who actually know what they're talking about. We do sort of hit the ball nonsense. But there definitely some valuations that are eye-watering, to say the least.
Yeah, and you can't tell me that a Big Bash franchise is anywhere near that. And so if you're that governing body and if you're the holder and you're looking at going, hang on a minute, we've got something that's valued at a quarter of what it could be, or even less than a quarter of it, we'd be crazy not to cash in on this. And so it's probably a bit of evolution rather than revolution, isn't it? A bit like we didn't we didn't particularly evolve stuff with 100. We revolutionized it by completely changing the formats. Seems to me they may be thinking of trying to just slightly tweak it to gain the most out of it. And what is a very good product, how can we get the most cash from it?
The cynic in me will always say it's to make sure that you get Indian players and Indian broadcasters and Indian partners, and that's what they're looking at. However, anybody dresses it up, that's basically what it's all about, right? In my opinion, anyway. But yeah, it happens. CPL, the Caribbean Premier League, is Indian owners. The 100 here, the SA20, South Africa T20 comp is Indian owners, and yeah, it's the same sides, isn't it? It's the whatever capitals and the across those sort of jurisdictions. And it wouldn't. I was talking to someone the other day. I'm not going to say who it was, who said that the Southern Brave would become the Southern Capitals because they're owned by GMR quite soon anyway. Yeah, it makes sense, right? It's just it's just the way the game's going, and you know, leads me on to my next point about the counties demutualising. It shows that the old model of cricket has gone, or is going, and cash is so big. The demands on the game is so large now from a broadcast and from a commercial perspective that ultimately you got 200 members owning a cricket club is no longer viable. It's happened at Middlesex, I think. I think they've demutualised. Any noise of it down at Kent?
Not that I've seen, but yeah, I agree with the fact that if you have a member owned structure, it really limits what commercial stuff you can do and because then you have the one thing in sitting in with Kent. Kent they're trying to work out how on earth to use this 100 money. This let's call this 25 million pounds. But sitting at the top of that, you've got people making decisions whose decisions might be a bit personalised with where they want to take. We've got to go up to Beckenham. Well, what's the reasoning for it? Is it just because what's your personal pull with
Yeah.
going up to Beckenham, or we need to go into Tunbridge? So that's the thing with counties. They're very traditional based, and I'll put myself in a little bit of that place with. I'm a big believer and a big liker of the traditions of what we do. Kent gave me my opportunities, and I remember first coming to Kent and the tree, not
Uh,
the talk of not an Underwood, Les Ames, or Cowdreys. So those traditions are so entrenched in it, and so when you keep it as a members are going to remember that because that's how they became members. They watched it. So I do see that. So that demutualization, it's something which will the positives of allowing selling equity and raising capital, all that sort of stuff, and modernizing. But where will that leave the traditions? And there won't be too many Kent members that will not be want to known as the Kent Bull Rangers or whatever you want to call it. That is for sure.
but football did it, didn't it? When in 1992, when Div One became the Premier League, there was a bit of uproar, I think. But nowadays it's just settled down clubs to clubs, and some clubs have moved. Man City have moved from Main Road to the Etihad. Tottenham have moved. West Ham have moved. So it happens, right? It's just in the name of progress. And look, some people are happy, some people aren't. But ultimately, that's what that's progress, whether you like it or not. The only sure thing is if you stand still, then you're not going to be there. So if Kent have to move to Beckenham for sake of example to preserve the club for the future, then that's better than no Kent at all. Ultimately,
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I've in even to even to bring that right down to club cricket. I know several clubs. So Marden, which is in the Weald of Kent area, I hope they've got. They've built themselves a fantastic hockey, cricket, and tennis club, all on the proceeds of selling the land they had. And so Kent and other counties are looking at that and going, hang on a minute, how can we, so that's when the tradition. So I 100% get it. I would go to Maidstone on a Tuesday night to do a wicket-keeping course, and I just look at Maidstone, where I played several county matches, and it's linked in there with the rugby club. It's central to Kent. I'm not a big fan of going up to Beckenham on a Wednesday night to train because it's 60 miles, but it's an hour and 45 minutes travel for me to get there. And so I go to Maidstone, and it's an open area. For me, it looks right for development. You could put an indoor school, you could build a new, and so there's bits like that. But I just think it's going to be so hard for counties to make that step, other than someone who's got an extremely brave CEO, chairman, and to be able to do it. I think like the issue I see with Kent is trying to make a blooming decision is so hard because of in a way, that the structure of it that's involved.
Yeah, well, that's the problem, isn't it? Do you think tradition holds back progress?
In a way, it can. Currently, I think what's tradition is linked to, because we've got an extremely traditional game. It goes back a long time, and so but the link of that game being at a location, that's where I think people find it really hard. Even if I go back to Kent as well, where we've got there's a memorial there and even the tree. I remember, the amount of ashes that was spread around the tree. And so all of a sudden, if for those people that have done that to family members, to see that disappear and be potentially built on, that's the sort of stuff that pulls at the heartstrings, and that's where the tradition and what that meant to people going to Kent, going to the county ground there with the lime tree and sitting with loved ones, and then those loved ones move on, and so spread the ashes. So that's the tradition bit for me, is what pulls on the heartstrings, but what we're up against is the business factor. So many counties without the ECB payout, they don't exist.
No, exactly. Yeah.
But what ECB are trying to do is give them an existence with this chunk of money. But with that may mean a big upheaval, which a lot of people won't like.
Also, when I sit in my elevated position in the commentary box at the Utilita, obviously Hampshire, another county that's changed grounds, and I look down on the few hundred people that come in to watch county cricket. The average age and profile of that person is a member of is a member of Hampshire, right? So they're predominantly males of about 70, and they have a disproportional say in the future of a club for a couple of reasons. One is they're traditionalists, and two, they won't be around in about 15 years anyway, when the club needs to make some cash. So demutualisation, I think, is a given, because I think it's a model that worked when cricket was a gentleman's game, and now it's basically same as football or the American sports. It's a big commercial beast. There's no place for them in the future of it. But yeah, you're right about the tree and the sentiment and that sort of stuff. But again, that's why I kind of asked my question, because does ashes around a tree, as sentimental as it is, does it hold back the progress of Kent, County Cricket Club? And the answer is it probably does, because that ties them to staying at Canterbury.
Yeah, I think Hampshire were lucky they had a visionary and someone who, I'm going to say it a bit crassly, someone who had the balls to actually do what they've done down there in Bransgrove.
Yeah.
Coming from a successful business background and having this vision. And now you go down to Hampshire, you've got that ground where the age groups, the twos can play. It's a great practice facility out the back. You've got your main stadium, you've got the hotel, you've got the golf course. And I think that's I think a lot of counties are trying to emulate that, and that's their thinking, is because, right, okay, how can we stay alive? And that was by doing stuff similar to like what Rod has done down at Hampshire, but not every county has got someone who's brave enough and willing to do that.
Yeah, I mean, Hampshire were bankrupt, I think, when Rod piled his money in, and he basically saved the club. And 25 years later, I was there commentating when the Utilita celebrated its 25th anniversary, and then about a week or so later, Rod resigned his position as from Hampshire Sport Limited, I think they're called, but he's got an honorary life, position there as a thanks for everything he's done. And yeah, everyone needs a Rod, right? Everyone needs a Bransgrove who can see
Yeah.
the vision of the club and want to take it forward.
The other issue you have is a lot of these people in top positions in counties, they want a legacy. They want to be remembered. And so they got to that, and what's my legacy? Well, my legacy is Kent developing Beckenham. My legacy is Kent developing Tunbridge Wells. And so that's that's the sort of the headbutting you have of people in place and these volunteers who want to leave something in this legacy.
Well, that happened to Lancashire, didn't it? Daniel Gidney, who's recently stepped down as CEO, he led the transformation of Old Trafford into, a bit like the utility, if not better, into what it has become. So therefore, I would assume that financially they're on a really strong footing. But then you've got ex-players like Michael Atherton and Clive Lloyd and David Lloyd, I think, saying, that it's not good enough because the club on the pitch has gone backwards. And that's always the payoff, isn't it? Look at Hampshire. Hampshire got great facility, but a second to bottom from in Div 1. So, it's a fine line between getting that right, I think. But then what is that legacy you want to leave? Do you want to leave a business that is on a sound footing for someone else to come in? Or do you want to leave, a cricket club that doesn't have great facilities, but it's top of Div 1 or whatever? It's who's done both. I mean, Trent Bridge, not massively overdeveloped. All right, the Oval is, and Surrey are the money bags of Div 1. They're probably not a great example. They're the Man City, aren't they, of football? But there's not many examples of great stadia and also a club that's consistently flying high in cricket.
Not in cricket, and I think a bit of that is to do with, we've had an not influx, that's the wrong word, but there's been an increase in salaries that has put more pressure on clubs. So with T20s and, sort of people just getting T20. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening with cricket at the moment. And so there's a lot of the counties that are under pressure to stay alive because, the ECB have said they're not going to give handouts anymore. And what we don't want to see has been talked for a long time about counties folding. I don't want to see any county finish, but it's possibly going to happen if the money from the ECB isn't used wisely. And so we may see a few less in the future, but that's not what the ECB want either.
Cricket's got to change. I mean, it's just it really is stuck at a crossroads. I think between what the not only in the boardrooms, but also on the pitch as well. We'll come on to England, New Zealand in a bit, and how Ben Stokes may or may not feel about the ECB. But fundamentally, the men in suits back in the Ted Dexter days, and today's guys, there's a big difference between where they come from, how they operate and how they behave. And one thing's for certain, cricket is going to mirror football and the American sports in its commercialization of the game. Lots and lots of people aren't going to like it, but if you don't do it, you're not going to have a sport in 20 years' time anyway. So kind of what do you have apart from taking the money?
More commercialized water breaks, mate. That's the way forward. That's the answer.
I reckon,
like they're doing in the World Cup.
I reckon they did that.
Commercialize the water break.
I reckon they did that so the Americans can understand it. In the NFL's 4 quarters, isn't it? So let's just call it a water break, hydration break. But actually, what it really is, if we do it in small chunks, then the Americans will know what's going on, and we can sell them the big dream for LA in the Olympics. I reckon that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and they can go off and get their hot dogs and extra large Cokes and throw peanuts, all that sort of stuff. All good. Everyone's happy.
and put out appallingly bad chants. We will win, USA, all that sort of tough stuff. Enjoying this heat wave?
Oh, amazing. I was out there today. Well, the last few days Jones fencing has been in full swing. So got to put a bit of a picket fence up in the back garden to stop the dog getting on the solar panels. So
That was 2 weeks
yeah,
ago you were
that's
going to do that.
no, I was getting someone in and they let me down, so I'm back to doing it myself. So that was my Father's Day, actually spent with Reese, putting up half of it. I've got to finish it off tomorrow when it's 37 degrees.
Nice. Well, you're used to that, standing out in the sun all day long. But, at least you had hat and sunnies on. I went to law, I didn't know. I went to the Oval on Friday, hobnobbing around in the press box, and went over to the pavilion for a couple of meetings. Whilst I was there, obviously, I did see, a lot of the day's cricket, and eventually, even though Sunday was billing up to be a big day, Henry just ran through England Sunday morning, and New Zealand won by a whopping 253 runs. We said at the beginning of the series that New Zealand should never be underestimated. Where do England go from here?
Well, I think for one, they're going to get the opportunity to get back more of the side that they had the success with in the first test. I don't think you can look too far from the fact the amount of changes that were brought in compared to, yes, you can talk about the Lord's wicket being influential, but ultimately that was the team that England wanted to have for that first test, and that was a team they had success with. Not taking away from the players they brought in, but just purely and simply, when you change that many players, there's upheaval, and especially there's some of them late doors and all the rest of it went with it. I'm not surprised that New Zealand won it. England still had some moments where they showed a bit sort of back in time that they haven't moved forward. But ultimately, I'll be more interested in this next Test match when the band's back together, so to speak.
What do you make of Joe Root's captaincy?
Difficult, sort of. I think it's easy to look at the back end of an innings and sort of say, "What you're doing, this is ridiculous. This is so bad." But nowadays, this is what players practice for. Players practice whacking it out of the park and are getting good at it. And this is the evolution of T20 cricket, the influence on Test cricket. And so, but the one thing I will say is that I think England are a bit quick, and it was probably a bit like from the Ashes, a bit quick to go to short ball theory. Matt Henry, on that last morning showed what just good bowling can do. So that would be my only bit, is that maybe if Joe reflected, could the tactics at certain points, crucial points, been a bit different, because they were a bit what we've done over the last few years, where I think we had some decent bowlers who could have bowled a bit differently and battled that situation differently.
Hindsight, Cox and Rue in the same side, a step too far from inexperience.
No, because they're the next ones. So that's what I mean. That's where you've got to look for the changes that England had to make. The changes they brought in were the guys they're looking at for the future. Rue's had an unbelievable start to his career. It's under some pressure. Cox the same, just off the back of a double hundred. And so you could argue, well, that's the best time to pick the guy. I think it was just the fact that there were so many changes that maybe we're looking at exactly like you said there. Should they both have played? Why wasn't Cox keeping? Well, he hardly keeps for Essex, whereas Rue's been keeping all year. So I didn't have a problem with those selections.
And talking of keeping, what did you make of Rue's keeping? There was a couple of drop chances, something you're familiar with. I was behind, so the press box in the Oval is in what was the Vauxhall end. It's now called the JM Finn end, I think. It's right by the sight screen. And so I was right down the line when Jofra came steaming in from the pavilion end, and I can't remember. I think Ravindra, somebody gloved it. I can't remember. And Rue. I thought it was a hard chance, but Jofra, was throwing his arms up in the air, and he lost his proverbial. I thought he was a bit harsh on Rue, but then I was listening to some commentary, and I think Varney or somebody was saying that that Rue should have caught it. I mean, I don't know what did you make of it?
Well, every commentator thinks that a keeper shouldn't drop a catch. It takes a lot for a commentator to look at it and go, "Well, that's fair enough. I'll give him that one." Even back to my time, I remember standing up to the stumps, and the thing would get an outside edge, which could have taken it to second slip, and it brushed my glove, and then I just knew, oh, there we go, that's another drop catch that they're going to. There were some absolute clangers, which was fair enough from my point. But going back to Rue, I felt they were catches that he will want to take, that you expect your international keeper to take, especially the one it was in his strong hand to his left glove. The one that you described, flying high over the shoulder again. Yeah, I think you know he will have expected to taken it, but he hasn't kept to Jofra. There's that element of pace, especially for those high ones. You can get done a bit with it being through you before you realise. I can remember missing some, and just thought, wow, that's hit me before I expected. So whatever it is, but I'll concur with you. I was disappointed with Jofra's reaction for
Yeah,
someone making their debut, who who could potentially, play quite a bit going forward because he's a batsman. He's a high quality batsman. If I'm the keeper and I'm looking up and I'm seeing my fast bowler carry on like that, I'm getting pretty annoyed, because I haven't done it on purpose. And so now I'm a bit sort of like, oh my gosh, every little thing I do, this bloke's going to go off.
yeah,
And so what I didn't see is following up. Did Jofra go and give him a, tap on the back and say,
not that I
sorry, mate?
saw.
Or did he just turn his back and send, and then just spend the other, and just sort of, again, that's the selfish side of cricket, that was all about Jofra's dismissal. Whereas actually, let's flip it. Here's a lad who's struggled a bit. It's his first international test. He hasn't had the best of times. Right, go and support him. And that's where, again, if I think back to myself, my lowest point was in the Ashes 2005 at Manchester, when I dropped Shane Warne. The straightforward catch. I wanted to go and stew in my room because I didn't want to go out. I just thought, what's going on here? How can I drop that? I wasn't allowed to. Freddie, Harmy, and I think Hoggy, we went to the Bellevue Dogs, and they forcibly dragged me there. And when I was away with the Lions recently, I talked to Fred about it, and I said, "You guys drag, you know," and that's, for me, that's what it was about. They recognised that, and Rui would have been feeling pretty rubbish. But so for me, the stuff we didn't see, and this is where the team side of it comes to. I'm hoping that Joff went up to Rui and made up and just said, "Listen, mate, listen, that was a toughie, right?" And gave him a bit of confidence. That's what I would expect from a teammate, to be honest.
Would you expected Joe Root to have handled that situation on the pitch any differently? But you got because he was
Oh,
filled.
sorry, I thought you were going to talk about his rebound there.
No, he was filled. Now we'll come to that. No, that's in the bizarre bit at the end because you sent me that video. You put on Facebook, didn't you? No, he was fielding a mid on or mid off to the left hander, Joe Root, which I've never seen field outside the slip area before. Anyway, so yeah, he was fielding there, and I thought he may have, been able to set a job for calm it down a bit. But I guess you also want your big quick to be fast as possible. I suppose that's your fine line, isn't it, between protecting the young keeper or not annoying your big fast bowler.
Yeah, you. I want to see Jofra Archer bowling with aggression, which he did. He had an unbelievable spell, where he had both batters in the first inning jumping around and it was absolutely gripping to watch, wasn't it? And I want to see him bowl with that aggression. I've got no issues whatsoever with that. As I said, I just have an issue with the reaction to a teammate's performance. And you don't mean to drop catches, and so yeah.
No, sure. Do you think, going back to what we were talking about before about Cox and Roux playing, do you think that was an opportunity for England to play, for someone like an Ollie Pope to come back in and bat at 6, maybe even keep? I mean, he's kept for England before, and actually just playing one of Cox or Roux, because I think, you say it's the future and they've come from the Lions and that's what the Lions is for, bloody, bloody, blah. But Ollie Pope has been just jettisoned. And I think this England side are guilty of that. You're in, and then when we don't like you, you're out, and you're never getting back in again. It doesn't matter what you do. So for me, I thought Ollie Pope should have come into that squad at least and given a chance to keep, and then they make a decision, of 2 of those 3 personally.
Yeah, when was the last time Ollie Pope kept? I don't. In a 4-day match.
Yeah, didn't he? He's kept in tests. Oh yeah, for Surrey and stuff. Yeah, well they've got Folks, they've got Smith, they got he's a long way down the line, isn't he? But still.
So I just think I can imagine Rob Key, Brendan McCullum. They, like you say, they have made the decision to move on from Ollie Pope, and it's not because of his keeping; it's because of his output with the bat. And so it wasn't that they weren't after a part-time keeper. It was an opportunity, and I think actually it was a good opportunity to bring Roux in as someone who's shown promise, and for Coxie. Two years ago, Coxie was about to play, but then bust his thumb, and so they've been wanting to get Coxie in, because he's such a good player. And so that's what they would have seen it as, a great opportunity to do that, rather than go back to. And I'm not saying Ollie Pope's not a good player, because he's an incredible player, but to go back to him so soon, I imagine they would have seen as a bit of a backward step and something they didn't want to do after everything that went on in the Ashes. And then they go back to Ollie Pope. I don't think that's not something that they would have considered doing. It's about a fresh start and then, moving forward.
If you're a punter, right, paying all that money to rock up, you got 5th day tickets and you get half an hour's play or whatever it was, you'd probably be thinking, well, maybe they should have picked a different squad, then there would have been more of a spectacle. I understand, obviously, that that's not how it works from a selection perspective, but, I just think that, well, all right, you could have said to Ollie Pope, listen, we're coming back to you now. This is an opportunity for you to show us that we were wrong to do it. And if Ollie Pope would come in at 6 or so, let's say he'd bat at 6 and Cox at 7, for sake of example, that's a much stronger batting lineup than we had. And if Ollie Pope comes off and gets some runs, suddenly he's back in with a shout. So why shouldn't he deserve an opportunity? I understand he had a lot of chances, runs and lack of runs, and we're going to talk about Jacob Bethell in a minute on that very subject, but surely you've got to recognise that class is permanent to an extent, and all right, he might have been in a run of bad form or whatever, but if there's a need for somebody to come in who can do your job, why not pick him?
Mate, are you sure you're not a brown hatter in disguise? You give it all this stuff about being a Hampshire supporter, but when it comes to it, all you do is promote Surrey players.
That's not necessarily true. It's mainly because there's no one at Hampshire who's actually going to get an England gig outside Sonny Baker, to be honest with you. Ben Mays, obviously, at the Lions did very well. But, yeah, I know it's only because I was trying to think of I was trying to rack my brains of who keeps around the country that's had international experience. Obviously, Folks was injured. Smith wasn't available. So that just led me to Ollie Pope. It was just coincidental that he also plays for Surrey. That's all it was, There's nothing else to it.
And the fact that Surrey are one of a few counties that will let you in on your media badge on a test match.
Tell you what, no, you don't. You have to. There's a whole process, mate. You've got to go on a website and click some buttons and all sorts of things. Jacob Bethell, right? 136 runs in his last 11 knocks. He's averaging 12.36. We're talking about Room and Cox, and I think Ollie Pope should have been given another run so that there weren't so many sort of fresh faces. Obviously, Emilio Gay at the top of the order. What do you make of Jacob Bethell? Has the IPL actually been any good for him?
Well, for a start, he's clearly outstanding. He's shown that in his international appearances. And I'll say the IPL is probably in the longer term, yes. Maybe for this Test series, it's showing that he's probably not as red ball prepared as he maybe wanted to. But I think everything he's going to have gathered from the IPL knowledge wise will come to fruition. But he's still a very young man, and it's a tough bowling attack he's up against, and even with his stats, he's incredible in the second innings, not so much in the first innings. So I think I was listening to the radio, and he averages about 8 or 9 in the first dig, but over 50 in the second. So that's when that's where he's come to it in his short career. But he's going to want to put first inning runs on the board. So that's going to be, for me, his task for the rest of this summer, because they're going to keep him at number 3. They're not changing him.
No.
So his task is to switch it. Jacob Bethell is going to need to score some big first innings runs, otherwise pressure will start to mount on him. That's for sure.
Because if you take Emilio Gay, who didn't play at the IPL, he's got 250s in a row and didn't get one in the second innings against New Zealand, but got runs prior to that. He didn't go to the IPL, yet Jacob Bethell did. I understand they're different players and whatever, but is there a case for younger players playing a combination of the two? So some county cricket, a bit like Rehan Ahmed did, some county cricket in April, some IPL, so they've got the mixture of the both, because it seems, I understand the argument, I understand the point you made about the experience and, who he's rubbing shoulders with in the changing room and all that sort of stuff at the IPL. But the other side of that coin, or the flip side of that coin, is he hasn't played enough red ball cricket. It's got no runs.
Yeah, quite possibly. But I think that's negotiations that's got to happen higher up between ECB and the IPL and each of those franchises, because I don't know it intimately in terms of but my basic understanding is that if you don't go, you get fined, and you can't, and then you're up for non-selection in future IPL. So that is something the player doesn't want to risk, because Jacob Bethell's going to look at the IPL and other franchises and see that as a real opportunity to play and to earn money going forward. So for me, it's the powers above Jacob Bethell that need to potentially, that's a fairly good argument you put forward, to try and do some negotiation to say, we want our players to come to you, but we also want them to get some red ball preparation. What's the deal we can strike?
Yeah, the pressure's definitely on him. I mean, he's obviously not going to get dropped. The Pakistan series is at the end of the summer, isn't it? So there's now no more red ball cricket. I mean, look, he's going to play very little for Warwickshire. I mean, he's one of those players that you have to think about what county he's actually attached to, because he plays so little for them. I think is Warwickshire, because now he's going to play some blast cricket, and then the 100 is upon us. There's England white ball cricket to be done as well, and then there's a Test series. So actually, he won't have much red ball preparation before he goes in to face that Pakistan attack, and then they're off to South Africa, aren't they, for a Test series? It's a baptism of fire, because then we've got the Ashes next year. So actually, the chances of Jacob Bethell getting a good run of playing red ball cricket prior to the Ashes isn't very much.
So you've written him off, mate. Well, that's your headline.
I'm
Sanjay
depressed.
Murthy writes off Bethell for the next 18 months. Gone. No, but when you put it that way, probably when you sit down and you map it out, which I'm sure the ECB have done with Jacob Bethell, once this third Test match against New Zealand's done, you're right. You then probably might well play it, because we're coming into a bit of a blast time for the counties again. Then he'll go to the 100. He'll dip back in. And then dip back in for Pakistan. Try and get some rhythm in that. Maybe towards the end of the series again. So we might see it in this third Test match. We might see our best of Jacob Bethell so far, but he's always going to be on that cycle. And when you are a player that plays all three formats like he does, that's probably the biggest challenge of a modern international cricketer is how do you flip between? And for someone who's, what is he, 21, 22? He's around that age. You know, that he with very limited experience, that's the toughest of the tough I could think. You know, I did all my learning at international level. You know, I played 1 year of county cricket and then got selected and went on my, you know, my little sort of 3 or 4 year international. And everywhere you go, you're learning and you're at the toughest scrutiny, and it's not easy. And so it's something that Jacob Bethell and people around him have got to really look at and work out how can we do it well for him, because he's a talent that we want to get the most out of.
Third Test is nearly upon us. Starts in a few days' time up at Trent Bridge. Stokes and Atkinson are back after their one-match ban. Sonny Baker and James Rue miss out. Jordan Cox is retained in that squad. Let's do a naming of the side. We'll talk a bit about Stokes and Atkinson and specifically how the ECB dealt with it, I think, as opposed to anything else. But what are your previews for the third Test? What sides do you see going in?
Well, very as close as they can to the first Test. You know, that would be my inclination. That's as simple as that. You know, those guys that were around for that first Test who missed out on the second, and we've spoken about how many changes there have been and the disruption of that. I think McCullum and Key and those guys will want to get back to that first Test and almost start afresh. You know, let's move on from the last 2 weeks. There's a little bit to sort of to go over, that's for sure. You might have some angry guys in terms of Atkinson and Stokes coming back into that fold, having been sent away, but they've been cleared. The ECB have done their, not the ECB, sorry, the independents have done their investigations and found there was nothing to blame. Correct. So for me, it's almost back to the start of the summer. You know, ECB and these guys who want to wipe the slate clean, much like the Ashes, start afresh, move forward. So we're back to square one in a way, and we're back to that first Test side.
More restarts than the dodgy Datsun Sunny ad at university. This is, I tell you. Jofra wasn't available for the first Test, but he's obviously played in the second. He's back for the third. England played Bashir. Well, they picked Bashir, I think, for the first Test, but they didn't bowl him. Is that right? Did he play in the first Test? I think he did. And was he selected?
Yeah, he was.
He was, yeah.
If he was a club play like your village play, you'd get the TFC award, wouldn't you? Thanks for coming. You pay your £10 match fee and on your way.
Yeah, exactly. I am going to, like I do every week, make the case for Rehan Ahmed because I just don't see the point of picking Bashir. You know, Rehan Ahmed, he got another 100 the other day, 120 odd for Leicestershire, I think. Who did they beat? I can't remember who they beat. Might have been De Morgan. He has played 5 Tests so far, taking 22 wickets, economy rate of just under 4. First class, he's played 41 matches. He's taken 91 wickets. Economy rate's pretty similar, but he's got a batting average of 33 and scored 700s at first class level in 41 matches. That's good going. I don't see why an England side couldn't go 1 to 6. We kind of know, right? 7 is Stokes, 8 is Ahmed, 9, 10, and Jack are whichever 3 quicks pick, you know, out of tongue, Archer, Atkinson and Robinson work for you. I mean, I don't see why that couldn't be what England look at, because I think he gives them balance, because that was the one thing that England were definitely missing at the Oval was balance.
Yeah, that didn't have Ben Stokes in it, did it? So you've brought Ben Stokes back in as the bowling all rounder. And listen, I'm not. The one thing you can't doubt is Rehan Ahmed's batting credentials. You know, I saw him with the Lions, and he is an outstanding batter. But as I've mentioned over and over, I just have doubts about his ability to hold down an end if he needs to in Test match level. And that's where I think the fact with Stokes coming back in and those three quicks, Bashir can get a go, but he won't come up. We won't come across another Lord's wicket. So you would argue that in this third Test there is a need for a spinner. Okay.
Yeah.
Even with Jacob Bethell dipping in and taking his, he seems to have a bit of a magic arm and taking what there isn't a need for with Stokes nearly getting a first class 100. I don't think there's a need for that batting amount that Rehan Ahmed offers. I think it's more about the bowling, and he's not quite there for me in red ball cricket. White ball, he will, he will be the future with that, and he's a. But yeah, that's my bit. I get it with the batting, just not quite with the bowling.
So what's your side? So what are you doing about Jofra?
I'd probably give him a rest.
Oh, would you? Okay.
Yeah, I would. I know it's only one Test.
He's had a tough summer, hasn't
there's
he?
some
Oh, he's played one match.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Well, but
the rest. Workload management.
Well, that's exactly it. If we're talking about that, and we're talking about him playing at the back end of the year against, or the back end of our summer against Pakistan, having the T20s coming up, the 100, then for those Test matches, I can see giving him a rest. So if Robinson's fit and Atkinson's come back into it, and Tongue, that's the only sort of potential. If Tongue's feeling a bit tired over Jofra, that may be it. That you leave out Tongue and you play Jofra.
Yeah, because Tongue's played the first two. It'd make more sense, wouldn't it, to rest the guy that's played two Tests as opposed to rest the guy that's played one Test, and then you'll bring in Bashir back in at 11, are you?
Yeah. And then because he's this is where I've been making fences, so I haven't had time to look at a lot of stuff. So I know they announced the T20 squad. So is Tongue in that T20 squad?
Don't know. Let's focus on the third Test. I haven't looked at that either.
Well, no, because it leads to my selection. If Tongue's not in the T20, if Tongue's not in that T20 setup, play him. If Jofra is, rest Jofra.
Right. Okay. Fine. All right. Fair enough. Let's just. I don't want to dwell on the Stokes Atkinson stuff. It's been out there for everyone to see. How do you think the ECB dealt with it? All told, you happy with their response?
They did what they had to. They had someone independent look at it, who I'm sure would have looked at CCTV and everything like that. If it was an internal investigation, people would be up in arms. But the fact it was done by the regulator, done by external, independent, have come up with this, we have to accept it and move on. And I think all the way along it was always sort of hinted and said that the two England players were pretty much blameless in it. They were in the wrong place, and they're definitely at the wrong time.
Yeah.
And so that's it. So let's just for once, it hasn't been hidden. It's come out. We're not talking about Brooke being punched in the face and 2 months later we're finding out about it. It's done. It's dealt with. They've served a bit of a punishment. Move on.
Yeah, I think they've done it. I think the ECB have handled it pretty well, to be honest with you, as well as they could have done in the circumstances. I think press and social media made more of it than the ECB did, publicly at least anyway. I like the fact that Gus Atkinson said he didn't know there was a curfew. I mean, there's an Indian farmer in somewhere in Madhya Pradesh who knew that England cricketers had a curfew. How Gus Atkinson didn't know he had one is beyond me. But I think the bigger story that's going to rumble on is Stokes's relationship with the powers that be. I read something earlier that after the 2019 World Cup heroics, so I think that Stokes, someone wearing a suit, it said, come up and asked Stokes for a selfie, and he told him to go do one. And apparently it stems back from, was it 2017 or so, the Alex Hales Bristol Ben Stokes incident. I think it stems from that, where Stokes feels that he was hung out to dry a little bit. Do you think this is just another nail in that particular coffin, or do you feel that it's just a bump in the road and everyone will just sort of shake hands and get on with it?
Well, I think the ones that matter to Ben Stokes in terms of, there's been a little bit of made of his relationship with Brendan McCullum, how that maybe isn't as close as what it used to be. Again, only those two guys know. It's press speculation, and I don't have a problem if the captain doesn't agree with the coach all the time. You want that. You don't want to. You don't want a relationship that's broken down, that that one walks in the room, the other one walks out. That can't happen. But only those within the inner circle know exactly how it is. I believe. I imagine Keezy's got a good relationship with Stokesy. Those three guys have shaped what's gone on in the last 4 years, and so they've had to have worked closely. I do get why Ben Stokes may have an issue with with the suits. Someone at a pivotal time, someone who's in a suit has come in and sort of barged in on celebrations and is only in it for their selfie. 100%. That he may be a bit annoyed at them, justifiably, but I think with the inner sanctum that matter to Ben Stokes, I think that's still okay, but only those guys know it.
And do you think trust, the breakdown of trust, which is press speak, I suppose, do you think that actually exists, or do you think it's just that? It's just something the press have made up to keep the story going?
Yeah, well, it wouldn't surprise me. They do like that, when to keep it rumbling on, because they're just waiting on it. And they just, but the big issue is they keep on getting fed stuff, don't they? So just when you want, and just when I'm sure Rob Key and now Marcus North want to park stuff, they can't, because it just the flames reignite and the press are absolutely having a field day. 35 pressmen up at a Durham County Championship match. Come on, stuff like that.
Third test starts on Thursday. What's your prediction?
Like I said, well, because it's coming back to that first, as close as we can to that first test side, I'm going to stick with England to win the series. I'm going to see them bounce back. Stokes has found a bit of batting form, which we've all been crying out for. Sort of Joe Root with some form. So there's some flashes. Emilio Gay, he wants to convert. So there's bits of, even Ben Duckett was batting beautifully till he got barbecued for a run out. So there's still good signs for England. Let's test 2, a blip, completely different side, wholesale changes. Let's go back, start afresh, and take that momentum we took from the first test match into this one.
Right, Smithy Mandana did you last week. Victory for me. Although Srisan, that will go down in the annals of close of play history with your record-breaking got it after 2. That was like when I did Wordle once. So if you do Wordle, I got it on the first clue. Complete fluke, obviously. But it's allowed. That's my first Wordle word.
Okay.
And that's what it was. So there you go. Right, you ready? As you ever will be. Until the age of 16, I was a highly promising footballer and played as a defender before choosing to focus on cricket. I believe this person also played, the football that this person played was for Reading Academy. So I'm sure that's going to be a very helpful clue to you.
Okay, you're giving me a bit of the geographical and defenders. So
yeah, exactly.
I'm thinking defenders' stature. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
No idea.
Educated at Bradfield College in Berkshire. Know anybody?
Excellent place. Yeah. Yes. Rob Furley, who's the director of cricket there.
Who are you, sir?
Rob was the first person I encountered when I come to trial for Kent. So still a good friend to this day. Marvellous.
You must have put in the good impression with your background in working in a pharmacy and digging holes somewhere in Somerset. I made history by becoming the first ever girl to play for the college's first 11. It's a prestigious school, girl playing for them. She made a senior women's debut for Berkshire.
See, this is where if we were, can I phone a friend?
Is Patch near you? You're going to bring him on in the corner.
Patch won't know. I've phoned Furls.
Well, there you are. You see, that'd be good. You could do, yeah. Bring him on. See, let's try it. Actually, stick him on. Let's see if we can. Let's see if he will answer. He's probably working, is he?
Correct.
Let's give it a go.
I can't. How? I don't know how that will work.
Well, you phone somebody. And you put them on a speaker.
No, come on. This isn't. No, this is about me. I can't go introducing others.
Well, apart from Patch, obviously. What are we doing? Yeah. So she made her debut for Berkshire at the age of 14, and she took 7 wickets in that first season. In 2020.
So she's a bowler, right?
Yeah.
Defender, bowler, stature. Okay,
one of 41 initial female cricketers in 2020 to be given professional full-time contracts by the ECB. She played for the Sydney Thunder in the WBBL. She took her first international 5 for 37 in an ODI against New Zealand, nearly 2 years ago, actually, on July the 3rd, 2024.
Right.
So
I would have been on holiday, so
just
finishing school. Okay.
Takes polls during a test match against South Africa in 2024. Also, good year for this player. In 2024, she delivered a career best performance in the second innings to help secure a big 286-run victory.
Right. How many questions are we at?
You've had 7 now. You gonna put yes in?
Oh, is that only 7? Oh, okay. No, I'm trying to narrow things down. So we're a bowler who's a defender. So someone who's fairly new on the scene as okay. I'm starting to
form a picture
because all the spinners don't strike me as defenders.
Okay.
That play for England. So I'm thinking more.
They could be up and down on the wing backs, overlapping. You know, they could be
still.
No, you're not having that. Party
okay.
Charlie Dean playing left back for somewhere she's from, Southampton or somewhere. No, you can't. Yeah.
Okay.
Little cross. No, they can't see that. She's known for her signature dangerous in-swinger that has recently changed. She's been changing her actions, bowler, because she was relying too much on one type of delivery, and changed her wrist position to bowl some out swingers as well.
Lauren Bell.
Yes. Her nickname was the Shard, also she denied that, standing at over 6 foot tall. The answer is
I remember
Hampshire and Southern
Lauren
Braves. Lauren Bell. Jonesy, very good show.
I remember I was watching actually, and a bit of the commentary was about her changing it and the ability, the wickets now that she's getting from being able to bowl outswing rather than just because in women's cricket it is mostly a lot of them the threat is in swing. It's just whether it's an anatomy, whatever it is, but a lot of the girls the women that I see bowling tend to bowl in swing, going around the country for Kent. Yeah. That's our biggest threat that we talk to our batters around, in swing bowlers and, just attacking the stumps. And I do remember a piece on, I think it was TV, where they talked about Lauren Bell switching to bowl outswing.
There was a video, wasn't there, on Facebook? I don't know if you reposted it or someone posted it and tagged you of a keeper dropping a straightforward catch and parrying it onto the slips. And I think you reposted it because that happened to you, didn't it?
Yeah, I think someone compared my catch in 2005 off Strauss's leg to a village. They gave the village cricket version and my version, and so that's I think I made a comment on it. Actually, I did it twice in my career, and it happened in the Test match, didn't it, with Root and Roo? The second one was in Pakistan, where off standing up to spin, it rebounded off Trescothick's head, and I dived behind Trez and caught it. So but we used to practice it. Duncan Fletcher, that was
chucking the ball at Trez's head.
Yeah, no, not quite that, but Fletcher's thinking, and this is why he was such a good coach, because he would analyse those situations. And so when we were doing slip practice, we would do it, and then we'd have a period of time where the slips would catch the ball and then would offload it left or right, and then you had to be alert. And so that's where that came from. So that that catch in 2005, it only happened like once like that, really. But but we practiced it in the morning's practice. So and it came into use.
There you go. You see, who knew how useful sort of that sort of stuff could turn out to be. I read the other day also there was an 18 ball over bowled in a match up in Cambridge the other day. What's the longest over you've ever seen bowled in professional cricket?
Professional cricket, yeah, good question. I remember we lost the year Leicester won the T20 and Paul Nixon, I think, took a great catch in a semi-final or something. We lost to Leicester in a quarter-final away, and our overseas bowler, that he bowled a few no balls, a few wides, and I actually got a bit irritated and forgot the stump mic was on. So there might have been a few, or I think I might have even had the mic on my chest, and there's a little bit that came out across the airwaves. So that's probably, I remember that, but anything longer, no. But 18 balls, oh my gosh,
That's good
3
going,
overs
isn't
in
it?
one go.
Yeah, exactly. I think also the umpire just gave up. I think just basically the umpire just called over and walked off because it was going on for so long as well.
Imagine being the scorer, because quite often, these village clubs, they'll have someone who rocks up to volunteer score. Could well be someone quite young learning it, and you have the smallest little box to 8. They'd be like panicking once you got to about 7 or 8. You're thinking, where am I going? I'm going to have to get 18. Is just a different level.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, you've got to be commended, haven't you? The people who give up spare time to volunteer their local clubs umpiring and scoring and making the tees and all that sort of type of activity, which is what the lifeblood, if you like, of domestic cricket. I saw Ed Smith law at the Oval on Friday, and he was up in the same area that I was in, and he was hot-footing it off to Canterbury, I think, to umpire. I think both of his sons were playing in the schools match, and he had to hot foot from the Oval over to Canterbury to umpire, and that's good going, isn't it? Imagine seeing Ed Smith turning up and umpiring your match. I mean, you probably know the laws, I'd have thought, don't you? Being MCC and
I
that.
doubt Ed Smith. Well, you'd hope so with Ed, but
Yeah.
I had visions of him in his Panama scoring as you. That's what I thought. That's what I could see Ed more likely doing. Sat on the boundary with an immaculate scorebook.
He did look like the man from Del Monte when I saw him on Friday as well. He had a little creamed linen suit on, light blue shirt, tie. Looked very nice as well, but he definitely looked like he should be growing pineapples somewhere in South America. I was listening to TMS the other day, and Dan Norcross was telling a story of, and it wasn't Ask the Umpire. They were talking about a hat trick that someone had claimed a hat trick, even though the hat trick was off a wide. And then the next ball, I think he actually got the bloke out. So he actually got 4 wickets in 4 balls. You ever seen anything like that? You ever seen someone claiming a hat trick, or you ever taken a catch off the wide and the umpire's given it, or anything? Any bizarre sort of umpiring decisions that spring to mind in your long and illustrious cricketing career, professional and otherwise?
Been sent a few. I'm trying to think of witness. Sort of. There's an interesting one in a women's game last year where the umpire gave something at whatever it was. I saw one recently of I think Fred might have been playing Pakistan or something like that, and he missed the ball by a foot and was given
That's
out.
right. Yeah, and he got given out.
And actually, Shoaib Akhtar in that Pakistan series we talked about, where I caught one off Trescothick's head. I met someone has actually through the school at St Lawrence that's closed down. Last year we had an OL that came over, and he knew Shoaib Akhtar well, and we were just talking, and he messaged Shoaib, and Shoaib said, ask Jonesy about the LBW that he was given out in whatever test it was, and it was Rudy Kurtzen gave me out, and I don't remember stuff like that. And so I went and Googled it. Oh my gosh, that was a complete stinker. That there was more splinters in the ball than there was left in my bat. But luckily I'm I'm sort of get over things pretty quick. But yeah, no, nothing like a hat trick off a wide that shouldn't have been or something like that.
I scattered the tee once playing in a match, and both teams nearly forfeited the match because there was no tee to be had. I think that's one of my finest moments, definitely, on a cricket pitch. If anyone's got any stories of bizarre moments, Jonesy, what are you
I did
add?
actually. I did when I first came over. to Clevedon in '98 when I was batting, and it was just quite short. I do remember quite enjoying sweeping and playing pull shots towards the pavilion and just sending people scattering. And and when Jen was there, when Jen would come along and watch sort of target, and it's a way of flirting, I suppose.
I assume, given the fact you opened the bowling as well, the opposition batsmen were doing the same to you as well.
Nope.
No.
These wrists are magic. They couldn't get nearer.
You've got a mate, and I can't remember his name. You played with him in Australia. He's messaging the show a few times.
Jamie Geraint.
Jamie Geraint, that's the fella. He talks about your bowling. I said I've had the misfortune to see you bowl, but luckily you became a keeper, and the picture in the background tells us all, mate. Jonesy, very good. Thanks for your time. You can go back to digging holes in your garden now and planting sheep or whatever it was you were doing, and I will see you next week.
Thanks, mate.